Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting of Monday, August 21st, 2023. Kelly, will you please call the roll?
Mayor McEachran.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Tabor.
Here.
Councilor Denton.
Here.
Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Bagley.
Here.
Councilor Lombardi.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Thank you, Kelly.
Welcome.
Before we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, a good friend of mine and who we all, well, whether you know it or not, she's the real mayor of Portsmouth. Joanna Deemer had a small procedure. She's watching right now. She's pissed at me for mentioning it. But just sending all our love to you as you recuperate. We all love you and look forward to having you back soon. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next up, acceptance of minutes. We have July 17th, 2023 and August 7th, 2023 bringing us up to date. I would await a motion to accept the minutes of those dates.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And next we have the recognitions and volunteer committee reports and the Pierce Island Wastewater Facility Plant of the Year Award.
May I take it away, Mayor?
You certainly can.
We have a wonderful amount of staff here tonight, and I'd ask Deputy Public Works Director Brian Getz to come up and introduce some of the out-of-town guests who are here to present a massive award, quite literally.
Well, thank you. Yes, Brian Getz, Deputy Director of Public Works, Peter Rice, Director, Eric Fiedler, our city engineer, Suzanne Woodlands back here as well. A number of people here that are currently operating the facility, and our design and engineering team, Terry Damaris with Underwood, who many know, previous city engineer, back tonight to celebrate a bit of his hard work, together with John Pearson, Eric Meserve, our design team from AECOM doing construction, and Peter Conroy, our chief operator. So Peter, come on up here, together with Chris Kelly, our assistant chief operator, Stephen Roger as our treatment ops foreman, and then other operators, Kevin Daly, Aaron Bickford, and Eric Gabecki, who cannot be here this evening. Somebody's got to man the ship. So all of them here to celebrate, and we're so glad to be able to be recognized for this. And with that, I'm going to introduce Rainey Pelletier and John Addy of the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services that'll provide a little bit of background and what all the award's about. So, Rainey.
That is a big-ass award. That's like a state championship, guys.
Have to let the
State championship.
It is
All
a
right.
state
This is
My
awesome.
age, I just can't carry something like that. So I think what that award is, and you should all be proud of, is the Plant of the Year Award given by New Hampshire Water Pollution Control Association. And from our perspective, we oversee some like 87 treatment plants, publicly owned treatment plants without the state. And I got to say, with Peter's help and Brian's help, and you have a great group of operators, I mean, I'm sure you all understand just how lucky you are. This is, when I look at what we regulate over the full state, I mean, Portsmouth is clearly a shining star. And I think a lot of that is because of what you folks have worked very hard to do. And I think when I look at the numbers of $92 million, and we're in partnership with this for $75 million, so pay your bills. But at any rate, you know, it's been a great partnership, and I think Peter, from Peter Breton and Brian Getz and the whole 9 yards, it's just, you have an amazing group. And I think, you know, when we look at the foresight that you've had, and I'll pick out the nitrogen reduction just as an example, you know, you had the understanding and the wherewithal to plan for the future, which is many times very difficult to get communities to buy in on and think of. But, I mean, you all ought to be really proud about what's gone on here, and you're sure very lucky to have the group of people that are behind you. I mean, when I look at all of the other major facilities in the state, of course, Manchester will probably call me up tomorrow after I say all this. But, I mean, I think you guys are a shining star. I think you're the model of people to follow. And many times if people are coming in and looking, because as you know, most of the plants in New Hampshire are like 50 years old. And what you folks have accomplished is just phenomenal. And I think many times if I have people come up that are looking at borrowing money for the SRF program and so forth, I will generally, if it's a big issue, I'll have them talk to Brian or Peter because they've done it and they understand it. And the communication skills have been phenomenal. And I think that goes from them working with you folks to the public access, to having the many meetings that you've had over the years. And it's really impressive. And the most impressive thing is the advantage that you've done to Great Bay and the river and the discharges. You know, it's phenomenal, the environmental benefit that you folks had the foresight to buy and do and run. And when I look at the numbers of what's coming out of the discharge now, what your operations folks have achieved is staggeringly good. So I won't take any more of your time, but I just want to say you all ought to be proud. And I think Portsmouth can be considered as a model of how to get things done, how to do it right, and how to educate your community. So, you know, Portsmouth's what, 22,000 people? So you think about the money you spent in that, it's impressive. So I applaud you all, and I thank you for having the foresight to have environmental concerns. You know Great Bay, the value of it, and the Piscataqua, and you've done your part. So I thank you. It's great.
Let's grab a picture. We're going to hoist the trophy. Jeez. This is hurt yourself.
Gotta scoot on in, guys. Gotta scoot on in.
Come on in. Come on in. Come on in.
Make it credible.
That was truly awesome. You know, the river is why we're all here. We're celebrating 400 years. Protecting it is a huge priority. It's great to see. It's great to see that come home. And I had no idea. Where do we display that trophy? Is it DPW? Can we get it in City
I
Hall?
think Pierce
All right.
Island should have it.
Pierce Island. Okay, all right. They can have it. All right.
Move it around.
Next up, public comment. Starting out with. I don't know if this is.
He's from East Kingston.
Okay, we'll come back. Tom Koffold, Arts and Culture Commission.
Good evening, Mayor, City Councilors, and members of the audience, and those at home. My name is Tom Koffold. I live at 53 Rogers Street. I am a member of the Cultural Plan Subcommittee, which is a subcommittee of the Arts and Nonprofit Committee. We were formed last year and charged this year with coming up with a cultural plan for the city. And one of the things that our work group worked on was a draft of the ordinance that is in front of you tonight, forming an Arts and Cultural Commission as part of the City of Portsmouth. For background information, people can check out our July 10th archived meeting We have a number of reports there that show the economic impact of arts and culture on the city. We did a number of interviews with people in the arts and culture community. So there's a lot of information out there. So I'd urge people to check that out if they have time. The ordinance at that meeting was approved by both the Arts and Nonprofit Committee and our committee. So that's already about 30 people have reviewed it and approved it as members of the City of Portsmouth. Our next charge is to come up with a cultural plan for the city, and we've been working on that this year. And right now we are trying to reach out to as many people as possible. So we do have an online survey that we'd love as many people as possible to take. You can reach that online survey through the city website. It should be right on the very first page. If you want to do a paper survey, I think there's some available at the library, or there will be, and at the senior center. There's also a lot of information just about our Arts and Nonprofit Committee and our subcommittee on the website. The survey is due by the 29th, and there's some wonderful incentive prizes donated by the arts and nonprofits of the city. So we hope everyone can participate in that. There'll be future focus groups and other ways to add your input on what you'd like to see in a cultural plan. And for those that might not know what a cultural plan is, again, check out the website. There's copies of the old cultural plan from 2001 that will give you an idea of what's included in that. But for now, if people could take the online survey, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next up, Lenore Bronson on resident advocates.
Good evening. I'm Lenore Weiss Bronson. I live at 828 Woodbury Avenue, and I appreciate this opportunity to exercise my First Amendment right to express my opinion in public. It's disheartening to see that a few so-called developers, hosts of tourists, and out-of-state tax-free shoppers are being catered to as if they held far greater value than Portsmouth residents. Those who live here are being bypassed by City Hall in so many ways and on so many levels that it's impossible to follow the inconsistent process now used to govern us. So who's advocating for our residents? I believe we can look to those Portsmouthites who are caring and stalwart enough to approach the city at meetings and hearings such as this. Some of them have lived here and been civilly engaged longer than many of our officials. They painstakingly do their homework and research on city and state ordinances, and then speak intelligently to issues that directly impact our daily lives. They express legitimate concerns, they possess admirable expertise, and offer well-founded, fair, legally solid solutions for implementing at the grassroots level. These are the true experts and representatives of our Portsmouth community, in my opinion. They represent many residents of Portsmouth, including those you rarely or never hear from, who may post opinions on social media but stay at home during city proceedings. They may have learned that getting involved can be futile and even politically hazardous. Yet the resident advocates who faithfully contribute in person at City Hall have often been dismissed by officials and so-called developers as bothersome naysayers who get in the way of many under-the-radar plans. As a longtime Portsmouth resident, I applaud their courageous efforts to spark awareness and to cultivate our increasingly fragile residential quality of life. Please listen to them, respect and respond to what they offer us. Keep in mind that they are acting on behalf of thousands of their Portsmouth peers, currently your constituency. If this means you now have to grant our residents priority over the wants of so-called developers, over tourists and out-of-state shoppers, so be it. I think we could all be pleasantly surprised at the outcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenore. Next up is Francis Cormier, roll out the pork barrel.
Francis Cormier, Melbourne Street. This is the form from July 10th. On page 3, you list a bunch of things you want to spend $17 million on. And some of the stuff's kind of vague. Okay, sidewalk traffic calming. So you're going to calm traffic from the sidewalk. The best way to calm the traffic is the flashing blue light of a police cruiser. Just a suggestion. Some of the stuff, sidewalks on Sagamore Avenue, I don't know about. Peace Trade Ports, street rehabilitation, not sure. But here's something you can know definitely what you're talking about. Bothwick Avenue bike path. What is Bothwick? There's already a bike path on Bothwick Avenue. I go down it, not every day, but it's a breakdown lane. And then there's a bike path from the Jackson Gray building to Islington Street with no traffic on it. And now you want to spend money on a bike path on Bothwick Avenue? I mean, you can't be serious. For example, while I'm on that subject, someone made a bike path from on Middle Street from about Union Street to the high school. That bike path, half of it's been eliminated. Okay, that bike path, I was told by one of you people, cost $250,000 for that bike path. And basically, it's a paint line with stencils for the little bike and the man riding the bike. Every 100 feet, you put down the stencil, paint the little man every couple 100 feet. That costs $250,000 for a bucket of paint. That's a pork barrel. I mean, let's face it. I could have done that. Give me a bucket of paint and a paintbrush, and I could have done that for $500, not $250,000. That's a pork barrel. Come and get it, folks. I know what your argument is. You had to have a feasibility study. You had to appropriate a committee to do a feasibility study. That's the pork barrel. I mean, paint ain't that expensive. And if you want to lower taxes, get rid of a lot of this pork, flushing money down the toilet. That's totally unnecessary. Try lowering taxes instead of raising taxes. It's a whole new idea. You can do it. You just stop wasting money.
Thank you, Francis. Next up is John Kudlich of Community Support for Maui.
John Kudlik, Jones Avenue. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak tonight. I'm speaking about a community. I'm speaking about Maui, Lahaina. It's my hometown. It was ravaged by fires, with hundreds dead and still over 1,000 missing. What I'm asking here tonight is just community outreach to everyone, an individual business person. There's not so much I can do from so far away, but I can raise my voice, and I hope you raise your voices too. It's my hometown, and I care for it so much, and I love Portsmouth too, but to see the devastation back home and not say something, I can't sit by. I've made multiple Facebook posts of various grassroots communities that are donating, delivering food to all the people out there. I've contacted friends, family members to see what they really need and how truly horrible what has been going on there. So I'd just like to say again, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to speak, and I hope this raises some awareness that how horrible these fires have been. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Next up is Roy Helsel on P's report.
Evening, Roy Helsel, 777 Mill Road. Anyway, we don't often hear anything about the P's, what's going on out there. But I wonder where the standing is for housing with the rest of them so that we can put some houses out there at P's instead of overcrowding this town some more and building more big buildings. Because there's a lot of land out there, and that's part of our land. And if we can't, they're talking about it. What is our standing on having housing out there? Thank you.
Thank you, Roy. Next up, Tom Neese on ethics ordinance.
Give me a second. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Tonight you're going to have the first reading of the city ethics ordinance. I think the revisions to the ethics ordinance are long overdue, and I compliment Councilor Cook and the other members of the governance committee for their work to date. I do, however, think that there is a need perhaps for some additional work before it gets moved forward to second reading in a public hearing. Some of these comments I made in an earlier email this month, but I'll repeat some of them now. The draft ordinance appears to completely ignore the possibility that a member of the city government or an employee can have a personal interest that is not a direct financial interest that may influence their decisions. I think this should be addressed in the ordinance. It is also silent on the possibility of a personal interest that's being created through employment or through a position as an officer of an organization that deals with the city. Neither one of these is addressed, and it seems to solely rely on personal interests that are developed as a result of, in broad terms, family relationships. Third, it's not clear to me why the limit on gifts is being, I think, more than tripled to $350 from the $100 limit right now. By way of comparison, federal employees are generally limited to gifts in a year of no more than $50. In addition to that, there doesn't appear to be any requirement for any reporting of any gifts that's written into the ethics ordinance. Whereas in the state legislature and the state government, I believe you're required to report gifts over a nominal amount, the nominal amount being $25, which is far less than the $350 we're talking about. So I would ask that you consider these suggestions or these ideas as you review the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next up, Peter Huda on McNabb contract city charter.
Good evening. Peter Huda, 280 South Street. What the council has in front of them tonight is a binding contract to commit taxpayer dollars for the benefit of one developer. This is labeled as a memo on public realm improvements, which means city streets, city sidewalks, the Hanover parking garage, and improvements to beautify the area. This is all taxpayer property, which you are entrusted to take care of. To clarify and make sure everybody understands what is being discussed here, the construction on the building on 1 Congress Street was approved by all the city boards. The building on the back of it was all approved by the city boards. What is coming before you and the council and the public is changing the public streets, the parking garage, and anything adjacent to that. And, oh, by the way, Haven Court, which was told to you that was privately owned by Mr. McNabb. So, according to the city charter, section 7.1, which was nicely included in your packet under another resolution, any amendments to the budget after adoption have to be ratified, and there has to be a public hearing, of which so far you have not had any public input. The only input you have had is from the developer. Now, this is an expenditure that was not in the budget. It was not in the CIP. It's not in the current master plan. And so far, it can't be in the new one because it's not done. So you are expending or asking to expend public funds on something that was not approved. We need a public hearing. So first thing you're going to say is we're not spending any money. This project, this contract that's in here is committing public funds on part 2, committing to spend more public funds on engineers, feasibility studies to move other businesses' dumpsters into our Hanover parking garage on the first floor. I'll talk to you more about the number of parking spaces that would take in the future if you'd like to know. Next thing I'd like to call to your attention.
Are you close, Petra?
Pardon me?
Are you close wrapping up your comment?
No, I'm not.
Well, we
But
will have-
I would think, Mr. Mayor, you would give me the same opportunity that Mr. McNabb had 2 weeks ago, and to let me finish what I'm going to say here.
How many, are you a couple of minutes here?
A couple minutes, Mr. Mayor. So, with spending this money, I think I'd like to know that was clearly described in the legal memo why we are going to spend more money on a project that only benefits one developer. And I'd like to talk to you about the second thing, changing an ordinance or a law to benefit one developer. It was clearly stated in your legal memo that elimination of parking spaces requires a change in an ordinance. Now, let's do some math on how many are going to be affected here. There are 5 parking spaces on High Street. There are 1 to 2 in the suggested new doorway, behind the new doorway in the parking garage. And on the feasibility study to move other people's dumpsters into the first floor, I was advised that there are about 12 parking spaces currently being taken by the contractor who is staging on the first floor to fix our parking garage. So that's 20. And you're going to send this to the Parking Transportation Committee. So I think we should be aware of how many we're talking about here. Councilor Bagley? The next thing I'm going to ask, and that you should be aware, and the rest of the city should be aware of, is this council going to change ordinances for the benefit of every other developer who has a similar plan to beautify the streets and sidewalks of Portsmouth? You are setting a precedent here. This is an ordinance. This is serious. This isn't just giving another giveaway to somebody else.
Thank you, Petra.
Next thing.
Petra, we have other people that are speaking. I appreciate giving you more time and appreciate your commitment to this. There will, as evidenced in the memo from staff, the next step for any of this to move forward from a parking standpoint, it would have to be first be approved by PTS and then could come back to council. So there's many more bites at the apple for this, and I'm happy to have more conversations. But
Mr. Mayor, in this contract tonight, if this council approved this contract, this is moving forward tonight. It has the date on it, and it has everything else in here.
I understand.
So,
Petra.
are you telling me that that's false?
I'm asking you to allow Esther Kennedy to speak, who is next.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Esther Kennedy on For the People.
Esther Kennedy, 41 Pickering Ave, Portsmouth. I think you folks need to start thinking about the people. This week, you had a grand event. And the sad thing to me to that event, I've heard it all. I saw it on Facebook. I've been called about it. The closing of the streets, the fact that most of the tickets went to the chamber. I've heard it. The sad thing to me is there were no children there. October 1st, I hear you're having another event. I hope it's a special one. I hope it's an event that's inclusive of all families, and that's what it says it's going to be. I hope it's an event that will be memorable to the children. And when we celebrated the 375th anniversary, I was here. And I had the privilege of being part of fireworks. I was 8 years old. And I had the privilege of being part of fireworks, seeing the now King of England taking place, being part of historical reenactments. There was a lot going on, and as a child, I could experience it. So far, that's not been happening in this 400th. And you folks are not going to be around for the next one, but the children might. So I would encourage you to think about the children and be more active, and maybe we need a few more events. I would encourage you to think about the population that got left behind, that obviously feels pretty negative about that, and really think about how we're going to finish up the celebration of 400. The next thing I'd like to talk about is developers. Now, I know when I was a counselor, the God bless her soul, the almighty Evelyn Marconi shared with me that someday someone's going to offer you money as a counselor. Someone's going to offer you a gift as a counselor. Someone is going to offer you a benefit as a counselor, and you're going to make a decision. And she shared stories of what happened to her as the great counselor she was. And I was able to say no to all of that. I ripped things up. I refused dinners. I paid for my own way whenever there was an event in Portsmouth. And I just ask, please, please stay out of the developers' pockets. And right now, you're not looking good with McNabb. Martingale went down, historical Martingale, McNabb owned it. Court Street wall goes down, McNabb owns it. Bow Street, there's a garbage collection thing with little birds on it that looks ugly, wrecks the street, McNabb owns it. Please, 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 don't look like you're favoring one developer. And maybe he's offered you things, and maybe he's given you things, and maybe he's gone out to dinner with city management. But have a public meeting. How hard is that? Have a public meeting, have the citizens from the area that he's affecting be able to come in front of you and talk. From what I hear, they haven't had that opportunity, and they haven't had that problem sharing that with me. The first time they had an opportunity to even say was in the walkabout, and then they didn't feel they really had an opportunity to speak. Well, how hard is it to have a public meeting?
Thank you, Esther.
Thank you.
Next up, Paige Trace on the topic of Portsmouth.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Paige Trace, 27 Hancock Street. Just when we thought the McIntyre lawsuit was bad due to your lack of understanding with the April settlement agreement, you've now created a sequel. The title? I Like Indiana Jane and the Agreement of Doom. This council will vote tonight to give away their right to govern the city manager. She alone will have the right to negotiate and sign an agreement with a developer regarding public property that rightfully belongs to residents, public streets, rights of way, public parking garage. You, the city council, are washing your hands of your sworn duty to oversee and govern. You're handing off your responsibilities once again to a member of city staff. She is not an elected official. You are. And Portsmouth will have an agreement that once again has absolutely no out. Sound familiar? Where is a copy of the CMMP agreement before your vote. Blank stares. You obviously have all once again read nothing. You toss out the character of Portsmouth as though it's the trash the developer wants to relocate inside Portsmouth's public garage. Why am I not surprised? Pardon me. Getting rid of the 5 parking spaces requires a change in ordinance. The opening he wants to put in Portsmouth's garage will not make his stairway ADA compliant. Those disabled would have to pay for their use of the garage to access the top of the stairs. That's discriminating to someone physically disabled. On another note, Pierce Island Wastewater Treatment Facility got a Plan of the Year award tonight. Are you sure it wasn't for the shortest lived, improved but non-functioning clarifying vat? Portsmouth's newest holding tank for untreated raw sewage. You still haven't fixed the Mechanic Street pumping station. It's looked like a miniature water world with plastic wrap hanging on it since last November. Not very scenic in the heavily traveled historic district, and the regular CSOs in South Mill Pond are unhealthy, third world embarrassing, biologically chilling. You authorized a huge expansion of city executive personnel and union negotiations right before the municipal election. You've quietly increased Portsmouth's budget by $20 million over the last 2 years. And this fall, the residential real estate revaluations will occur. Respectfully forget about the thought of Port's affordable housing. I just hope there are those left who will remember the harm you've created with your unchecked spending. You're fast making this city affordable only to the 1%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see.
We have one hand on Zoom.
Yeah, we got Sue Potadora on the topic of several.
Sue Polidora, Middle Street, and I had to echo Paige Trace's opinion. Many of her opinion are also mine. Regarding this agreement that is being discussed tonight, I urge you to slow down a little bit. Remember what happened with McIntyre? Many agreements happen, no out for the city. You have to look at this closely. Do not push it out to somebody else. You're there to ask the necessary questions about this. I remember during last meeting, I think it was, when the city attorney mentioned about Mr. McNabb owning that Haven Court Road. I remember none of you knew that. It took you flat-footed. And I said, you should know to ask these questions. They should have informed you about these things. It wasn't a good look for you to just have that blank stare like you just heard it for the first time. This has to be, people need to opine on this. It has to be slowed down a little bit and make sure that the city is the one that benefits from anything that happens in that area, because just beware about people offering you a lot of free stuff and good things. You never know what is attached. The other thing is that the recommendation for the ordinance regarding code of ethics, I have read some of it. I have read a little bit on the context regarding people not being able to opine on other meetings if they have, if they are a member of the council or they are in one of the boards. And it's like, has legal cross-checked this with the first, about the, conflict with the First Amendment? Just because you have a position doesn't mean that you relinquish your First Amendment for other issues that are not 100% related to the job that you're sworn to perform. The other thing is that I've been following some of the news about our situation with the wastewater treatment, and that I'm kind of speechless when it comes, and I know several languages. I'm speechless because of all of this stuff. I mean, did they give us that award before or after the millions of raw sewage that were dumped on the South Mill Pond? I mean, I really don't get it. It's very, very baffling to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Next up is Irish Mike with What's Hate?
Good evening, Mayor. Hypocrite tells a story or lays out a course of action, but the actions that they take contradict their stated beliefs or feelings. After multiple buildings got spray painted in the spring, the mayor, the assistant mayor, and the chief got up and made a statement that there'll be no hate in Portsmouth and we won't put up with it. Something pretty much in those lines. Some of the businesses that got hit, their online pages had each had a few hundred comments. Probably over half of the comments were hateful. I have two of the comments here. One comment stated, "I'm not for violence, but we should have National Punch a Nazi Day." And another comment read, "Any of my dealings I've had with the PD, I found them to be homophobic and racist AF." I know personally. I know a lot of the police officers, and I know that statement is 100% false. But none of the businesses spoke out against any of these hateful remarks. Plus the teenager that did the spray painting, I'm sure has problems, but racism, I don't believe is one of them. Plus, why did the PD wait months to release his name, considering they knew who it was right away because of prior dealings? I always knew this council were hypocrites, but I didn't think they were despicable too. Blackface, red face, or bronze face is racist. It became popular in the late 18 to 1900s, basically portraying the black as foolish or weaker. We've had governors, news people, and even the Canadian Prime Minister face backlash for using it, and there was call for them to step down. So why for the alleged Portsmouth 400 dinner did they allow a woman to perform in the middle of town in black or bronze face? It's shameful and a disgrace, and whoever allowed it should lose their job. And apologise. And apologise. And if they feel that they have to do this to entertain their community, they're sick and uneducated. Thank you.
Have a good night, Mike. Thank you. Next up, did we get through? We got one person on Zoom. Two on Zoom. First up, Barbara Massar.
Go ahead, Barbara.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council, and City staff. My name is Barbara Massar. I'm the Executive Director of Pro Portsmouth, located at 3 Greenleaf Woods Drive. But tonight I'm speaking to you as the co-chair of the Portsmouth Arts and Nonprofits Committee. I'm echoing the words of my colleague Tom, who spoke to you earlier in person, and we're very pleased and honored to be bringing forth an ordinance creating an arts commission and building upon the work that's been going on for the past almost 3 years now, the Arts and Nonprofits Commission and now the Cultural Plan. We're looking forward to the reading and the passage of the first reading tonight and returning in 2 weeks and making a presentation to educate all of you on the work we've done thus far. Thank you, everyone. And in particular, thank you, City Manager Kennard, for your support throughout this whole process. It's been very meaningful to all of us involved.
Thank you, Barbara. Next up, former Mayor Rick Beckstead.
He's in the room.
Oh, you're in the room. Oh, wait, you're on Zoom. All right, this is a first. Somebody not signing up and putting their hand up on Zoom. That's great. Love technology.
I wanted to cover my bases
Yeah.
all the way around, Your Honor. Good evening. Rick Beckstead, 13995 Islington Street. First, I'd like to thank everyone for the Arts and Cultural Committee. That was my hope and my dream when I formed that committee during unforeseen times. I was hoping it was going to come to this, and I'm grateful that it's going to. You've got a great group of people there. Second being this street exchange. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out why Mr. McNabb would be so willing to go and give us a gift, and everyone calls it a gift. I would like to ask that some of you, maybe one or two of you anyway, would ask Mr. Rice before you do anything to ask what the batting order is for those 3 streets. See, in the city of Portsmouth, when we have upgrades, like Islington Street, and we're doing everything, there's a batting order. What's the batting order? When was the last time the city of Portsmouth put money into that street with the water lines, the sewer lines? What is the batting order? Is it 2 years out, 3 years out? Is it because Mr. McNabb doesn't want to wait 3 or 4 years? So we disguise it as a gift that we're going to pay for that. And then we're going to be able to put the icing on it that we want. Now, as far as deals go with these agreements and stuff like that, we have the worst luck in the world when it comes to agreements. We all know the McIntyre. And we certainly know the Fountain Place Garage, $5 million for very little land, the most expensive there is. And the McIntyre didn't work out so good. Now, we have a legal department, we have a legal team, we have a city manager. And we all know who was in charge of that at the McIntyre the last time around. I don't have a lot of faith in our legal department or our city manager to actually get this deal done and be in a positive direction for the rest of Portsmouth. Very concerned about that, and I think a lot of other people out there as well. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Rick. Next up, do we get through the Zoom and the quasi-Zoom? Next up is, do we have Peter? Can you read that, Cal?
Gilligan.
Peter Gilligan. Oh, okay. I see it says East Kingston.
East Kingston, New Hampshire, right. I'm very pleased to be here to speak with you, and I want to tell you that I have had the great pleasure this year of watching my bridge go up and down very carefully. And I have met a lot of people from England, other countries. They come here and they want those locks. They take pictures of themselves next to the locks. And I think it's of great value to this board to consider saving those locks. As much as it may pain you, they're from all over the world, and from England, from France, everywhere. And it's my great pleasure to meet them, and I would ask this board to consider saving that area.
Thanks very much, Peter. And all right, looks like we're closing it up with Mark from the park as listed here with the topic of Jason Aldean.
Well, good evening. I was going to play a song, but I'd rather see Peter Huda come back up here and talk about the things that matter.
So that's not.
So I'm going to yield my time.
That's not how that works. I'm sorry, Mark.
Why?
It's just this is so. The rules that we have are so that when it comes down to public comment, it happens differently in different parts of the state. It's not required. Not every city or town has public comment. If it's a public hearing, there's different rules that allow to that. Some towns do it so that there's public comment at the end, so you listen to the meeting and then you speak on the meeting. Some towns have it anything that's relevant to the agenda first and anything that is not relevant at the end. But the rules and ordinances that we have is everybody's entitled to 3 minutes for public comment. It's not a dialogue. It's not where we discuss things. It's pretty hard to do that. What this is a decision-making body, and we listen and want your input in that, but it's not a yielding the floor back to other public comment speakers. And the reason, I guess, for these rules that might seem somewhat suffocating of the dialogue, it's so that we're work together to get as much input as possible and then have a conversation amongst the counselors who are elected to make the decisions in public so that we're able to have that. And then every 2 years, we get an election, and folks are like, I like this person's judgment, or I don't like this person's judgment. This person listens to me and voices my concerns that I've shared with them either in public or in private, or they haven't. But what public comment isn't is just an opportunity to have a dialogue. And we could go back to having the public dialogue sessions, and maybe we should be doing that where we have more of an exchange. There was pushback a little bit in terms of the notes that were taken from the public standpoint there, but I'm happy to bring back the public dialogue, and we can do that at a future meeting, and we can have a topic of conversation, and we can have conversations as we did in the last council that kind of went away from COVID. And I think that might be a better place to have some of these conversations. But public comment, it's an opportunity to share your opinions in 3 minutes about any topic that you want, whether or not it's germane to the agenda or not.
Okay, well, I don't know if that really answered the question, but I'll tell you what. You don't want Petra to come back, that's all right. So, how about we play a song?
You have your free speech to use it as you
I got my
wish.
3 minutes, right?
Sucker punch somebody on the sidewalk, carjacking old lady at a red light, pull a gun on the owner of a liquor store. You think it's cool, act a fool if you like. Cuss out a cop, spit in his face, stomp on the flag and light it up. Yeah, you think it's tough. Well, try that in a small town, see how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town. Got a gun that my granddad gave me. They say one day they're gonna round up. Well, that shit might fly in the city. Good luck. Try that in a small town. See how far you make it down the road. Around here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town. Boys raised up right. If you're looking for a fight, try that in a small town. Town. Round here we take care of our own. You cross that line, it won't take long for you to find out. I recommend you don't. Try that in a small town.
Mark, you're always great about picking 3-minute songs.
Yep.
Salita,
My next one, they're going to get better and better.
can't wait. Salita, I saw you. Do you want to speak? Just
Buddy's board. Zelita Morgan, Leeches Avenue. Good evening, councilors. Thanks for the opportunity to speak and to include me a little late. I kind of wanted to speak on the ethics proposed ordinance before the council for first reading. And I kind of want you to focus on item J of that proposal, because there is a big issue with that, and that is about freedom of speech. I don't know what problem you are trying to solve, but I think you're going to create more problems. I have never, I think when you're trying to constrain and limit it, saying like families and people cannot speak, it's just like you can't, it's not in your position, no matter where you are, which committee you are, to abridge people's First Amendment rights. So I want to caution you to that, because I am surprised that this has made this meeting at a time when we are facing incredible challenges to democracy. And this actually speaks about abridging people's, actually restricting and going against people's First Amendment rights. You know, I have sat where you are right now. I have heard people like, it doesn't matter to me if they're related or not, really. It doesn't matter. Because I think our role, your role, is to make the best of what comes here in front of you. You know, it's not about silencing people. That has been tried before in history. It failed. That's how Hitler, by the way, got a grip on everything. Because somebody was so protective that they had to put all the legislation and everything that some speech would not ever be allowed. So I really would like you, in respect to the First Amendment right and the freedom of speech, to send this back to the Governance Committee and really look, because you cannot abridge folks' right to speak. And also, I will kindly ask that, as someone who sometimes is joining through Zoom, I would kindly ask that you don't mute when folks are applauding. So I have noticed several times that when the audience is applauding, that when we are in Zoom at home, it's mute, totally mute. You cannot hear anything. So I would kindly ask, that's also, you know, part of speech, that we observe those things. I mean, I don't take that lightly, and I think I have my own personal history here. My father being in prison, watching several acts of aggression for people who just want to speak their minds. In the moment that we live right now, I think we are here to stand for democracy. I hope you are as well. So I would ask that you reconsider, you review, and in light of our First Amendment rights. Thank you so very much, and have a good night.
Thank you, Salita. Next up, public hearing and vote on ordinances and resolutions. First reading of ordinance. First reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 4, adoption of new section 1.413, Arts and Culture Commission. Sample motion, I'd wait a motion to move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading at the September 5th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, first reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 4, Section 1.402, Economic Development Commission, subsections A, B, and C. I'd wait a motion to move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading at the September 5th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Section C, first reading of ordinance amending Chapter 1, Article 8, Code of Ethics, preliminary, Section 1.801, definitions, in Section 1.802, conflicts of interest. I'd wait a motion to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading at the September 5th, 2023 City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Cook and then Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just want to make a few brief comments because there have been several comments already tonight. I wanted to first thank Mr. Neese for coming, who he also spoke with our committee and helped advise us in governance when we were initially looking at changes to this specific section of the ethics ordinance, which is around conflict of interest only. And I appreciate his comments, and I think that they're really important. What we're bringing forward from the governance committee is what we could get done, what we thought was possible in review with our legal counsel, and I think that that's really important. All the changes that are before you have been reviewed thoroughly by legal counsel, have been drafted by legal counsel at the direction of the governance committee, and then again reviewed by the governance committee. And we took months of public comment on these changes and proposed changes. And so what you see before you tonight is some changes that present first a preliminary paragraph explaining the point of having an ethics ordinance, and then definitions. And the reason you see definitions is we added some sections to the ordinance, in particular delineating the differing roles that we have in the city. And I think this is an important part of these changes. We have different roles in city government. This ethics ordinance applies to everyone in the city, employees, elected officials, and individuals who serve on committees and on quasi-judicial boards. And so one of the things the governance committee's aim was in bringing forward these changes was to codify the rules for quasi-judicial boards in comparison to the legislative role of the council, and they're very, very different rules. And it's the same differences as you'd suspect of a role that a legislature would have, someone who's elected to Congress, versus somebody who's a judge and sitting in a judicial capacity. So in bringing forward these changes, what we're bringing forward is those rules that our quasi-judicial boards are already given as instructions from our legal counsel. And I know there are concerns, and we've heard those concerns tonight around First Amendment speech. This only curtails, and it doesn't really curtail because this is part of state law, it limits the ability of members serving on quasi-judicial boards to speak to those boards on those matters that are of a personal interest. And we defined that personal interest, and we had to define family as well. And that's the only area where this is referenced, because the interests that they have in their family's immediate interests are directly impacted in the decision-making they make as judicial members of those boards. So it's really important that we make sure that everyone understands that they are above board in their decisions at that level. So that's what you really see tonight. And we will come back at second reading with a very formal presentation laying out exactly every change that was made. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has tonight. And I've also asked our counsel Sullivan to be here tonight to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Councillor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. As one speaker brought up tonight, my issue is with item J. My mother lives in Connecticut and doesn't really have anything to do with Portsmouth, so it wouldn't affect me personally. But the reason I'm concerned about that is, oftentimes there are situations where people are either estranged from their parents or from their children for whatever reason. And they wouldn't know what's going on in their lives, so they wouldn't even be able to know when to recuse themselves because they've cut off communications. And the reason that this concerns me quite a bit is often that reason has something to do with who that person chooses to love, whether it's a gender issue, sexuality issue, a religion issue. It's typically marginalized members of our community who have challenging family situations. And I feel like this item J, as it's written, unfairly targets people that have estranged family relationships. I'm okay with the household. Generally speaking, if you're in the household with somebody, the relationship is, if it's not great, at least you're aware of what's happening in that person's life. But there's many, many cases where people have no idea what's happening in either their parents or their children's lives, and that's already a sad enough situation. And I think this adds to that burden.
Councillor Cook, here to respond.
Sure. As you will note, this only applies to quasi-judicial boards. So we're talking about applications before land use boards like the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Board or the Historic District Commission. And in any of those applications, if you're sitting on the board, you know the name of the applicant, you know their address. So we would think that you would know the names and the address of the people that you're immediately related to. And so the reason we put in this definition of family is because the legal definition, you have a financial interest legally in anything that your parents do, even if, because we don't know if they have a will or not a will, the land could pass to you. So this could be a direct personal interest, and you're making a decision around that piece of property that you have a direct personal interest in, and the same with your children. We don't know what your legal relationship is, but all we're asking is that people recuse themselves and not take part in decisions as quasi-judicial board members if something that is related to their family as defined by parents, children, people that they live with, people that they live with by choice, comes before them, and that they recuse themselves in that decision-making and that they don't speak. So if a family member comes to speak before a quasi-judicial board and everybody knows that that's a member of your family, and then you're participating in the decision-making, that very presence of that individual could sway the views on the board. And so that's the concern, is you don't want to put a board in a position that they feel they have to make a decision in favor of an applicant because one of the board members' family members came and spoke to that. So that's the distinction. We're trying to stay above board when it comes to the law, so that there is no question if something is appealed to the other board in town or judicially appealed then to court, that the decisions are defensible on the part of the city. Does that
Legal
make
inquiry?
sense?
Quasi-judicial is under item I. Family is under item J, and perhaps it's my misunderstanding of legal contract, but why would the item J only apply to quasi-judicial boards? And I think my point still stands, because I think people should have the opportunity to serve on quasi-judicial boards even if they don't have strong family relationships with people they no longer live with.
So we can get it over to legal, and that's probably a good place to get it. I just want to make sure I understand your question and Councilor Cook's response. Your question is that why are we defining a family in this in any way? And Councilor Cook, your response is that there are times when a family relation will have an impact on your ability to be impartial on dealings of quasi-judicial boards, not to be able to serve on a quasi-judicial board, but simply when a matter affecting a family member as defined by J, and this comes before that board, you would have to recuse yourself as a part of the process, so not to influence the decision that could benefit potentially you one way or the other. Is that, do I have this?
Yes, and family is only referenced in this section, under section J. So, but we had to put the definition of family in the definition section so that everyone would understand what the definition of family was. We didn't want anyone to think very, very broadly about family, second cousins, third cousins. It's a small town. People are related to a lot of people. So we wanted to be really clear about what that definition was.
Sure. So like, I guess an example of this would be like, my mom still lives at 70 Dennett Street. If somehow I was on the planning board and we were talking about putting, I don't know, some really fancy bridge on Maplewood that would make her have permanently waterfront access, I would likely have to remove myself from that decision, lest it be, a conflict of interest from being, half mud half the time, half scenic Riviera the other time. So is that what we're talking about here?
Yes, it is.
Okay. I guess my concern is if you are estranged from a family member and they own numerous pieces of property that are constantly changing hands, as some members of the community do, how would you even know when a property came before you was to a family member if it was owned in a trust, let's say?
If it's owned in a trust, it's not typical. I don't know if that probably, but we are out of the depth. city attorney or of council, let's try to dig into that.
We will. We'll report back.
Okay.
Your Honor.
So I guess just on, so, there's a lot of business, and part of this is to get it to public hearing. Part of it is then to have the public come and talk to us. Tom was nice enough to send emails. I think having the conversation, it might mean that we are going to reschedule public hearing to make it potentially better if we make changes, but I wouldn't think that defining family would be one of those changing legal, or it wouldn't be broad, or it wouldn't be a big enough change to have to prevent it from being approved at second reading. Or am I mistaken on that, City Attorney?
I'm sorry, I was making a note.
So if we were to change somehow the definition of family between first reading and second reading, would that have a material impact on the changes of the ethic ordinance for to pass second
I
reading?
think it would depend upon how
Always
the
that's
extent
a
of the
lawyer's
change.
answer. Yeah.
Depends.
All right. Okay, Councilor, we'll go down the line. Councilor Moreau, Councilor Tabor, Assistant Mayor.
I was just hoping we could get either our city attorney or of council regarding this, just to speak to the reasons why this does or does not affect one's right to speech.
Well, Attorney Sullivan is here. He's been working on the ethics ordinance with Councilor Cook. So I'll let him start fielding that question. I have my own response, but.
Robert Sullivan, off council. Here is the single most important thing to have in mind in discussing this definition of family. The purpose of this ordinance, as determined by the Governance Committee, the purpose of this ethics ordinance is so that the people in the community have confidence that their city government is honest and ethical. The section we're talking about has really only one effect on the operation of government, and it is this. When a city official is acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, when that city official is acting like a judge, then that city official is going to have to act like a judge in real life in terms of ethics and conduct in relation to family members. Think, for example, you could not imagine in a criminal case that a judge would preside over a trial in which some family member was a party or had an interest. It would never happen. It's inconceivable. This provision in this ordinance is just intended to bring about that same result in the case of a Portsmouth city official acting in a quasi-judicial capacity. If a family member has an interest in the matter before that official acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, then, like a judge, that official should step aside so that there'll be no question that personal relationships with the family member had any effect or not in the decision. That is the simple purpose of all of this. It frankly leads you, I think, to believe that in order for the people in the city to have confidence in ethical conduct of their city officials acting in a quasi-judicial capacity, the definition of family, frankly, should be as broad as any reasonable person might possibly consider. Certainly, this broad.
Councilor Cook?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. We're staying on the family, and then we'll go back to Councilor Tabor.
Well,
okay.
Council Sullivan, I was hoping you could also address the issue of free First Amendment rights and right to speech under quasi-judicial board. I know that Councilor Moreau was concerned about that. So,
with regard to this provision,
yes,
this does not have any First Amendment bearing whatsoever. It doesn't take any rights away from anybody. It simply says that a Portsmouth city official acting in a quasi-judicial capacity should not vote in a matter involving a family member. It's as simple as that.
Councilor Tabor.
Just as a matter of background and context, the governance committee spent a lot of time on this. There's a legislative part of the government and a quasi-judicial part of the government. We as a council are legislative. We decide policy. The planning board occasionally acts in a legislative manner. For example, creating a master plan or a CIP. But when they have to decide, does something meet the zoning ordinances of the city or not, that's quasi-judicial. They are calling balls and strikes, so to speak, on the basis of the city ordinances. And once we get into that realm, the applicant should be able to expect impartiality from all the members of the zoning board or the ZBA or the HDC. In fact, there's a lot of state law that says it's a juror standard. And if you were a plaintiff in a lawsuit and you knew the juror had a strong opinion against your application, you wouldn't feel you had impartiality. So what we were trying to do, and it may be imperfect, it may need more work, is make sure that in the quasi-judicial role, the members of the boards are free from entanglements and advocacy. They're not involved in litigation. They're impartial on behalf of the applicant. That was our intention.
Assistant Mayor?
Your Honor, I would move on just to ask a question, so I want to make sure.
Yep. Oh, yep.
I would like to know from the Governance Committee the reasoning behind raising the gifts and favors from 100 to 350 per calendar year, please.
I'm happy to answer that. The reason we did so is because employees are also included in this ordinance, and the cost of attending a conference has gone up to this amount, around this amount. Some of the registrations are $250, $300, and those are often given to our, like the registration is waived. So our city staff member then has to count that as a gift in disclosure. So we want to make sure that they can attend conferences that are relevant to their training or their specialization without feeling like they have to turn all of those opportunities down, because it is education that we want them to receive. But currently, with the current limits, they're often in a situation where they have to say no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Moreau.
There was a question earlier regarding personal interest through employment, and I know I read through this, but I don't know specifically if that is truly addressed specifically.
We didn't change any of those provisions. We left them alone. So you will notice there are several references that are already in the ordinance to direct, indirect, direct, or personal interest. We would think that people would already disclose those interests, because you're asked to, if you're an elected official in this council, every year we file a disclosure, and you have to declare your interests, say if you own a business, if you have an ownership right in a business or property within the city of Portsmouth. So we already make those disclosures, and we may be adding more disclosures. We're working currently on the disclosure sections for elections and for all employees and officials. And so those will be coming forward separately, and we might decide at that point, governance hasn't gotten there yet, but when we have this discussion, we will probably have a lively discussion on exactly what needs to be disclosed.
Councilor Cook, I just have one question. Under the definitions of direct personal interest and direct pecuniary interest, in pecuniary interest it is measured as both a loss and a gain, but on personal interest it is only referenced as a gain. Is there a reason why we did not include a loss?
I'll have to ask the legal counsel who wrote those definitions for us, how that came to be. I will tell you that the reason there's a distinction there is we refer specifically to direct personal interest for quasi-judicial boards, so we had to define it. And then we had to define that in, and then the question is, well, how is it defined for the rest of the ordinance? And that's direct pecuniary interest. So, so we can ask of counsel if.
Attorney Sullivan.
An important point to make right away is none of these things in here were my idea. But my job was to write what the governance committee wanted written, and that's what I did. And with that, Your Honor, I actually did not hear your question.
Okay. Attorney Sullivan, we have listed two definitions of interest, both a direct personal interest
Yes.
and a direct pecuniary interest. With the latter, the pecuniary interest, it measures in both a gain or a loss, but in the personal interest, it only measures in terms of a gain. Why would we not also want to include a loss from any personal interest there as well?
I think that is an excellent suggestion, Your Honor. I think that change should be made by way of a later amendment to the ordinance.
Hey, glad you came up here, Bob. That's great. Okay, so we would make that at second, before second reading? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
At second.
At second reading. Okay, and that wouldn't change the?
I don't think so.
All right. All right. No further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Attorney Sullivan. Next up, on to public hearing adoption of resolution. Public hearing adoption of resolution appropriating $1,900,000 from American Rescue Plan Act ARPA grant to pay costs associated with Community Resource Network, transportation facilitation, mobile library resources, community health needs assessment recommendation, community campus capital improvements, and IT infrastructure items listed in Exhibit A, and for the payment of costs incidental and related thereto. I'd wait a motion. Well, we'll get through the presentation. There's a presentation, I believe.
Yep, me, Your Honor.
Okay. City Manager, please take it away.
Thank you, and I'll be joined by my colleague, Recreation Director Todd Henley, momentarily. So what we'd like to do is to summarize what was initially brought forth to you in the July 10th City Council agenda and then discussed at the continuation meeting, which was held on July 24th. The recommendation to the council is to use ARPA monies to fund 6 discrete projects. The first 4 were recommendations directly from the COVID Recovery Task Force, which convened for, at least a year and wrapped up recently. And from the work they did, the 4 recommendations are in front of you here. The first one is to improve the existing resources available on the Community Resources Network website in an effort to target help for the nonprofit organizations that exist to support the community. And the funds would be utilized to engage a technology consultant to explore opportunities to leverage their platform. The second item would be the $10,000 to facilitate transportation options. This would include the purchase of gas and Uber, Lyft gift cards or similar to facilitate transportation to and from such activities as after-school programs, medical appointments, jobs, childcare, and other essential trips. This investment recognizes that sometimes the best transportation option is a direct point-to-point solution on an as-needed basis. The third item listed here would be to set aside $250,000 to work to implement recommendations that will come from the Community Health Needs Assessment, which has been ongoing this calendar year and will wrap up by December. And the idea would be to fund the recommendations that are time-sensitive, that have a defined scope or project, and are supported by the partner agencies that are working together. And the fourth item speaks to mobile library services, which is something our great Portsmouth Library has been interested in offering. This would allow them greater efforts at community outreach at places like parks, neighborhoods, and local events. And our library director, Christine Fries, is here with any questions you may have, but this is a good example of one she's familiar with in Columbus, Ohio. And the idea would be to set aside $80,000, $50,000 of which would go toward the acquisition and customization of the electric vehicle, and $30,000 would provide money to fit out the vehicle and to operate and maintain the vehicle for 2 years. Don't forget, we have 2 years to expend the money. And then if I can call up Todd Henley, he'll walk you through the community campus improvements as he goes. Take it away, Todd.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Todd Henley, Recreation Director. So just here to speak on what we're proposing for the community campus improvements. We can go to the next slide. So this is just a basic overview of the services that are provided at the community campus currently. It's the Recreation Department main offices and programming space, and there are 4 current nonprofit agencies that rent other spaces in the building. Those tenants are Seacoast Community School, Krempel's Brain Injury Center, Child Advocacy Center, and Seacoast Outright. It is also the future home of the Robert J. Lister Academy, which is about to start construction there very soon. We also provide spaces for numerous outside greater Seacoast agencies to rent for events, meetings, etc. These are just some of the examples of programs that have happened at the campus in the last few months. Some weeks this summer, along with the normal attendance of children at the Seacoast Community School, we would see upwards of 250 plus children in the building at once. On any given day, though, the building serves a population of 0 to 100 years old. As some of the tenant organizations grew over the last 20 years, 3 out of the 4 current tenants have been there since the building was first opened. There was no real plan for the long-term layout of the building. Vacant space was taken whenever it became available, thus resulting in some tenants having office or programming space scattered throughout the 3 floors of the building. The picture shown is a snippet of the lower floor as it is now, showing different tenants throughout one general area. Next slide. After meeting with each tenant and getting feedback on their needs and concerns, JSA Design created a preliminary design of how each organization could either relocate or get improvements. Examples of some of the improvements include moving the front desk to provide more visibility to who's entering the building, creating secure suite access points for the child care wings, and reimagining some open spaces into recreation classrooms. So this looks at the main floor and shows a more cohesive design with the Seacoast Community School consolidating into 2 lockdown wing areas. This also shows the expansion of some recreation spaces and offices and the ability to block off the gym area from the regular office programming space. You can see the relocation of the front desk to provide better sight lines at the entrance also. So the 2 red circles on the left-hand side are the 2 lockdown areas with access to the Seacoast Community School daycare wings. The circle in the middle is just showing the relocation of the front desk, so we are seeing everybody as they're approaching the building as compared to what it is now. And then the circle on the right is just another example of being able to add in an additional doorway space that can lock down different areas of the building, depending on what event is going on or programming that's happening. This lower level view shows the relocation of a few organizations, making 4 distinct areas for each of them. This also shows the beginning of the Lister Academy wing at the bottom there. The mezzanine level would become more recreation spaces, and it would relocate all of the Krempel Center admin offices to be together in one suite. We are asking for this funding so that this comes at no expense to the current or any future tenants. So this work would ultimately greatly enhance the security of the building for all tenants and create better customer flow throughout the building.
Thank you, Todd. And just as we've learned in 16 or 17 months of ownership and assessment of this large building that we've taken ownership of, and we're proud to, we've learned a lot about the building, and we're working together as a team to make the improvements. So Todd is joined by Public Works Director Peter Rice and Facilities Director Joe Almeida, along with our CIO Pat Ainsworth, who would share that the following IT and related cybersecurity needs have come to light as a result of getting to know the system. So we are asking for an additional $40,000 separate and apart from the $1.5 million that Todd spoke about in order to invest in and deploy more reliable and secure IT solutions, which include new design and configuration of the network, new switches, new access points, new and realigned cabling, and a new firewall. And all IT needs would be better coordinated, maintained, and managed with the city undertaking this work on behalf of all the building tenants and users. So number one is to address the shortcomings of our current Wi-Fi that's in place. The second bullet speaks to the involvement of the replacement of network switches throughout to provide more and updated capacity. Number three speaks to the ability for us to allow access to remote in to monitor the system as optimally. And the fourth bullet speaks to the fact that the system in place is 10 years past its end of life. So it is time immediately to fix that, and the funding available through ARPA would be eligible for that. And to answer a question that I believe Councilor Moreau had asked at a previous meeting, this is a really hard slide to read, but what I can tell you is we have assigned or committed $8.4 million of ARPA funding, which represents 65.2%, which currently leaves, before our conversation tonight, $4.478 million, or 34.8%. And the ask of you this evening would be to spend approximately $360,000 out of the restricted public health negative economic impacts portion of our ARPA funds that have been received, and $1.54 million out of the revenue loss category, bringing the total amount of ARPA money to have been pledged and obligated to an even 80%, or $10.3 million, which still leaves $2.578 million, or 20%. So the whole team is here to answer any questions, and as Deputy Finance Director reminds us all at the bottom of this slide, all ARPA funding must be obligated by December 31st of 2024 and expended by the end of the calendar year 2026. Stop there. We'll be happy to take questions.
Thank you, City Manager. First up, council questions. Councilor Denton, and then Councilor Tabor.
Thank you. This is more of a comment than a question that needs to be answered tonight, but when it comes to the purchase of a Polaris Gem Electric with customization, is the city willing to consider a charging station at the library to help charge that electric vehicle, and ideally a fast charger? So give some thought to that.
I saw some nodding to a charger. I think we'd have to do more investigation on whether we could handle a fast charger.
Councilor Tabor.
When we bought the community campus, I think we said we'd have some short-term leases for the tenants, and it now looks like we're looking at them as long-term tenants. If one of these tenants left, would these improvements still be valuable to us, or are we doing a lot of fit-out for tenants that may not stay for the long haul?
I might let Todd speak to the relationship we have with the tenants and their tenure, but I can say that the goal of the work we would do would inure to any tenants, because we're consolidating program space, we're consolidating admin space. We would imagine those would be beneficial to any potential user, but I think it's my understanding that the current tenants in place are looking to stay long-term. But
sure. Like I said, 3 out of the 4 current tenants are original to when the building opened. I mean, this has been their home for the last 20-plus years. They expect it to be their home for the next 20-plus years. So it's, you know, in the conversations that I've had with all of the executive directors there, everyone is very excited about having some input into this type of a project and being able to really modify the spaces that they currently have or move to a different space and really make it work for them, which it hasn't. You know, they've been getting along fine, but there's definitely some programming needs that all of them have, especially Crumple Center spread throughout the building. So, you know, this is also just a really positive impact to their organization too, if we can get this done. If I can add to that, we took on the acquisition of the building and recognized the need to subsidize the rents. We still want to honor that, and this
expenditure of funds would allow us to keep the rents at a low rate and make the necessary improvements to the building.
Thanks.
Assistant Mayor.
Thank you. This may be for facilities or Todd. With the moving of the space, are we thinking that we'll have opportunities to have leasable space for other nonprofits that may be fit up at other city locations and looking for places to relocate?
Yes, I think part of this is going to be once people are put into the proper places, we'll have a better idea of what's available at the end of that, and then we'll have the opportunity to decide what happens from there.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Bagley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. Watching the presentation, I was struck by how many of the updates are security related, which I think is needed in today's day and age, especially with the Lister School moving there and the Seacoast Community School already being there. The question I have, and I wouldn't want to hold things up, is in the state of New Hampshire, there's a lot of funds available to schools for hardening type projects such as this. Have we looked into if there's any grant money for any of those parts of the modification plan that we could also utilize?
We actually have, there was some grant money available through New Hampshire Humanities, I want to say. I could be wrong, though, because I'm New Hampshire Charitable Foundation, I believe, that we looked into. That was actually towards community centers as well. And so we were, I met with them. They basically said this would be a great project that we could give money towards, but we weren't ready at that point. We kind of need the designs to be ready to go and all that stuff before we could go back. And they have another, they're doing more awarding in this fall. So we were kind of hoping that we might be able to go back to them and do that. So, in terms of specifically for security, I have talked to the Seacoast Community School, and they offered some insight onto a couple of other options too. But they couldn't apply for them because they're not the owner of the building. We would have to. So there's definitely, I guess, other opportunities available that we're keeping our eye on.
It could be that the ARPA funding, if it were to be in place, could serve as a match to prospective grant opportunities. And I might put Joe or Peter on the spot. Does the school project have its own line item for security measures as part of the work it's doing, independent of what we're doing?
Yeah, yes, it does. JSA is also the architectural firm for the Robert J. Lister Academy, and they do have their own line items to cover all of that, including all of the IT and wiring as well for that entire wing. So they're covering that piece.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook and Councilor Bullock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just have a financial question. I want to know how confident we are that the $1.54 million qualifies for revenue lost dollars from ARPA.
By putting it in the revenue loss category, it means we don't need to meet any requirements in order to utilize the money, because as you will recall, 10 million of the 12.88 can be used without restriction.
Councilor Bullock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm certainly excited that we're making this building safe and secure, especially since we're educating children there and housing all these wonderful recreation programs. I will ask one small question. I've had it from some members of the community. Is there an AED in place at the community campus?
There might be one on every floor, but
You said AED, right?
AED.
Yes, we have two of them at the
Okay.
campus. Yeah.
And so that would, is there one at the field as well?
I recently purchased an AED to be installed at the turf field, and we
Awesome.
are in the process of figuring out where we're going to put that.
Yep.
But I have it physically. Yes.
All right. Thank you. I know some members of the community were concerned with that, so thank you very much.
Have a point of order, please.
No.
Where, are they not?
No.
We'll have the public hearing.
We'll have the public.
Where's the money coming from?
We will have a public.
Is this money that you have set aside?
So
By
we're
taxing the people of the community?
this. We're going to have the public hearing after the council questions, and we'll have more council questions. Thank you.
I think you're out of order. I should be able to ask a point of order. Question.
You are going to have a public hearing in a matter of moments, and then we will have more council deliberation. Any other councilor questions? Public hearing is open. If you would like to rise And Portsmouth residents will go first. Please come up to the microphone, state your name, your address, and any comment you have. No restrictions on the time that you may speak. This is your opportunity, sir, if you'd like to speak.
As a point of order, I would like to see, where is this money?
Please, just for the public hearing, would you mind just stating your name again?
Oh, my
and
name
your
is
town?
Peter Gilligan, 4 Autumn Lane, East Kingston, New Hampshire. As a point of order, I would like to see, I'd like to determine where this money is come from, what budget. Have you already raised this money from taxation of the people of Portsmouth? Have you already done that? Where does the money come from?
So, Peter, this is not a conversation, but these are the public hearing. They speak at us, and then we further deliberate. But this is American Rescue Plan Act funds that were delivered through the U.S. government to the state, and then here to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. So they are federal dollars that we are spending, and so they have already been appropriated.
But they could be used to reduce the tax rate here.
No, they cannot. Nope. So they can't be used in that. They have to be for revenue loss, and there's specific economic revenue loss applications to some of them, but it's specific in that they have to be for projects that are not just replacing or lowering a tax rate. Any other public speakers? Okay, I will close the public hearing. None on Zoom?
No.
Okay, I guess I had a couple of questions specifically on if there are to be funds available and they are not matching funds, but they could replace any of the work that is done, what would happen to the ARPA funds that are currently appropriated to do some of this work?
I'll speak to that. The fire department is a good example of that. They did not utilize, give me one moment, I think it's 4,500. I wish Andrew were here, he'd know it off the top of his head. $4,501 or something like that, so we were able to return that to the available balance of ARPA money.
Okay. And then is it on the department heads, or who is looking to look for grants, given that we do have this money appropriated? Where is the process for looking for grants in the example of Councilor Bagley's question on hardening of a softer target?
In that case, our IT department would work with the school's IT department. We have several staff throughout departments that are savvy in both writing grants and administering grants. And with funding in place, we can then go after additional grant money, which could, if we receive it, go to offset the ARPA money, in which case we would report back to the council that if any ARPA monies were not used in this project.
Thanks, City Manager. And then I had a question maybe for Christine on the pop-up library, just the library in general. Thanks for sticking around. The question is, how many school-age children do we have that are currently making use of the library as a percentage? Any idea?
I know that it's 18% of our population.
18% of our population.
Yeah, and almost all school children have access to our books through their school classrooms. I would guesstimate that about a third to a half of them also have a library card. Sometimes families have their own card and not all the children have an individual card until they're a little bit older.
Sure. My daughter wanted to sign up for one, but I still get the emails when they're late fees.
Yeah.
Or late, not fees, but late books. Would a part of this ability to have a pop-up library allow people to sign up for a library card mobily?
Correct.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they can do that online, but we would be in places, as the city manager mentioned, parks, fairs, schools, outreach, understanding mobility and transportation issues in the city. We'd like to be able to expand the reach out to other people.
And I remember this on the first year council. I think it was your predecessor talking about, what would be a great addition would be a mobile library. It still stuck out with me. I am really excited that this is happening. I think that we have a huge asset in the public library. And when anybody ever goes to the library, I think, young or old, you realize just how much that is, but people's lives are busy, and if this could be the gateway opportunity to get more folks in there, or, for a long-term standpoint, if they're never able to make it to the library, to be able to bring the library to them, I think this is just a perfect use of what the ARPA funds were designed for in terms of building back stronger than before. So thank you so much, Christine, for putting this forward.
Your Honor, question for Christine. This tranche of money would cover the acquisition and operation for 2 years. Do we have an estimate of what the yearly cost would be?
We do. These estimates are mostly based on my colleague in Ohio's experience for the past 8 years of auto insurance, about $500 annually. Maintenance is also about $500 annually, and electricity varies depending on how often it's used, but approximately $200 a year. And the new versions of the machine we were looking at least have solar panels on the roof now in the newest versions that would increase that ability in the battery.
And what is the shelf life for one of these mobile units?
Yeah, I can't speak to all of them, but I know that my colleague has had one for 8 years, and it's still in good shape.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Brody.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wonder about staffing this. Is this going to be staffed by current staff?
It is, and one of the points in discussing this versus the old-fashioned bookmobiles, we looked at a number of things, and one of them was staffing. These smaller vehicles don't require a special driver's license, and my colleague has had people fighting over who gets to drive this particular bookmobile. But any of the smaller size things and electric would allow both for sustainability and for more of our staff to be able to do that. Potentially, either 1 or 2 staff members, or potentially a staff member and a volunteer.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine.
Thanks, you.
Christine.
Any other questions? We will require a roll call vote.
Motion
We need
first.
a
Oh,
motion.
we need that motion. All right. I'd wait a motion to move to adopt the resolution as presented.
So moved.
Second?
And a roll call vote, I believe, for 2/3.
Please.
Yes. Assistant Mayor Kelly,
Yes.
Counselor Tabor,
Yes.
Counselor Denton,
Yes.
Counselor Moreau,
Yes.
Counselor Bagley,
Yes.
Counselor Lombardi,
Yes.
Counselor Blaylock,
Yes.
Counselor Cook, yes, Mayor McCachran,
Yes.
unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Next up, our city manager with items that require action.
We have 3 tonight, Your Honor. The first item is a request to establish a public hearing at the September 5th City Council meeting to take up the supplemental appropriation regarding collective bargaining. In your packet, you have a memorandum from our city labor attorney, Tom Clausen, regarding the successful achievement of 5 tentative agreements with the following units: the Firefighters Association, or the Firefighters, the Professional Fire Officers Association, the Patrolmen's Union, known as the Police Officers, the Police Ranking Officers Association, known as Police Ranking, and the Police Civilian Employees Association, known as Police Civilians. These 5 unions have all voted to ratify their tentative agreements. And there will be a full presentation at the September 5th meeting. The highlights are as such. Both fire department TAs are for 3-year collective bargaining units covering from July 1 of 2023 through June 30th of 26. Both fire department TAs include robust but competitive compensation increases, in year 1, followed by more modest compensation increases in the out years. And both fire department TAs implement new and expanded wage schedules that will make future contractual wage adjustments more steady and predictable for the city. In addition, these will include annual increases in the percentage of premium cost sharing that employees will pay for their health insurance. And finally, both fire department TAs reintroduce the stipend related to training for water rescue and related job functions. All three police department TAs are for 4-year collective bargaining agreements covering from July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2027. And like the fire department, the police department TAs will also include robust but competitive increases in year 1, followed by more modest increases in the out years. And similarly, there will be an increase in the percentage of premium cost sharing that employees will pay for their health insurance. And the police the officers and civilians will include new expanded wage schedules that will make future contractual wage adjustments more steady and more predictable for the city. All three police department TAs include a parental leave policy to the department, and all three police department TAs include comprehensive language governing the implementation of body-worn cameras and in-car video for all relevant personnel. So the theme of all 5 TAs is that they were necessary for the police and fire to attract and retain top talent in a uniquely competitive, once-in-a-generational market for quality public safety personnel. So as mentioned at the beginning, Tom Clausen will be here to present the TAs in more detail. However, we cannot vote to adopt the TAs without the requisite funding to be in place. And our finance director is here this evening. She has calculated the total first-year cost for all 5 TAs at $1.464 million. And as you know, there was some funding set aside in the FY24 budget to cover some collective bargaining contingency funds. However, that amount was insufficient to cover the total cost. So for year 1, we are looking to use $890,000 from unassigned fund balance, and that would be the request formally to you at the September 5th meeting, along with the adoption of all the TAs.
Thanks, City Manager. I'd await a motion to schedule a public hearing to appropriate $890,000 for the unassigned fund balance to fund these agreements at the September 5th City Council meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? System Mayor.
Thank you. This question would be for Judy. And if you don't have the answer tonight, just at the hearing, do we know the cost for the remainder of the contract? The cost increases for the remainders of the contracts?
Good evening. I don't have a total cost. I mean, we had the 5 separate tentative agreement cost out sheets. So we have them kind of individually, but the total cost is, if you want me to go through the individual ones, or this is
Can
just
be
the
at the
cost for the.
presentation.
Yeah, it can be at the present, if we can consolidate
Sure,
them for the
yeah.
presentation.
Right. This cost here is just for FY24.
Yeah, I would be looking for essentially the cost increases that we could be expecting for FY 25 and 26 potentially.
Oh, and I think, and this might help answer that question. So the fire department is a flat 2% increase for those years, and then the police department is still going to be using the 10-year rolling average.
Okay.
So what that might be. In the cost element sheets that we provided, we just used 2% because that still is the floor in the contracts, but the COLA could run about 3% that we're kind of keeping an eye on, if that was you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Judy.
Any other questions? From a housekeeping perspective, we require first tentative agreements to be agreed and presented, and then we can bring forth a public hearing. That's why we're at today. And the next chance to have a public hearing is at the next meeting due to some inability to get a quorum and the changing of some notice requirements in the Herald. So that's why we'll have the public hearing at the September 5th meeting, and look forward to the robust discussion. But I would say, from a perspective of one counselor, the ability to attract and retain talent is important. Everybody always asks or wants us to run government like a business. And in the business, you have to attract talent. And in this job market, to be able to keep talent is much less expensive than going out and finding new talent, which is also really hard. So we'll be having that conversation in light of, the incredible pressure that we feel, making sure that we're able to get the right men and women in the job of public safety. So look forward to that. I don't think we need a roll call vote on this public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 2 is to present to you for consideration, as discussed at our last meeting, the memorandum of agreement regarding public realm improvements. So at the last meeting, the council voted to approve the working concept subject to the staff reporting back with a memorandum of agreement between the city and the developer that identifies the rough scope of work and the needed legal documents to proceed with that work. Since that meeting, staff have worked with the developer to produce the attached memorandum of agreement with an associated exhibit for consideration by council. City staff and the developer agree that the attached documents memorialize those expectations and the city's ordinary practices for work by private parties on city property. And it is worth noting, and I think it came up earlier tonight, that any permanent elimination of the parking spaces and loading zone on High Street would not be part of this agreement, but would require an ordinance change. Therefore, should the City Council wish to pursue that ordinance change, it would go to Parking and Traffic Safety and be returned to the Council. I know that City Attorney Morrill has a little bit more color commentary, and Deputy City Manager Suzanne Woodland is here to answer questions as well.
Sure. So what we did is we undertook trying to enumerate the improvements that were set forth in the plans that were provided by the developer, and then what the city's obligations would be versus what the developer's obligations would be to do all of these improvements. Essentially, the city's obligation is to waive the fees, the license fees for the developer to make the improvements on the public streets. There is a provision that the city should employ a third-party engineer, but that is to be paid for by the developer. There are other provisions for the city and or the developer to possibly in the future procure a third-party study for feasibility regarding the High Hanover Garage, and also a study for a parking traffic engineer for the High Hanover Garage entrances. But those are not mandatory provisions of this memorandum of agreement. So I think a couple of questions came up in regards to this earlier. The waiving of the fees is not an appropriation and does not require the process that appropriating money would require under our charter. There was some commentary about closure of the entrance to the garage on High Street, but while the developer talked about that initially, that's not part of the plan right now, as you can see by the attached diagrams that you have here. In regards to Haven Court, the ownership of that street is a complicated research project, but what the city has found is that they own a small section of Haven Court in fee. The city owns a larger portion of Haven Court in fee that runs from the bottom from Fleet Street up to the top of the hill. And then there's a very small section in between those two, and we've referenced that in this memorandum of agreement, that the developer, it's his burden to obtain whatever easements and rights he needs to from the Wineberry property. So the city council is not forfeiting any of their legal rights by allowing the city manager to have authority to sign the required legal documents as they become needed and drafted. That is what the city manager does in all circumstances here, is sign legal documents on behalf of the city council once the city council has determined the policy that they want to employ, and the signature on the legal documents is the city manager acting on the behest of the city council. So I think those are the concerns that were raised earlier I wanted to address. Happy to answer any other questions.
Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. And this might be a question for Director Rice. Just so there's no confusion in the community, we are doing quite a extensive rehabilitation to the parking garage, and I believe the parking garage entrance is closed currently due to the city, or may be closed in the future due to city requirements, and they have nothing to do with this project. So I just wanted to clarify that.
It's somewhere in the vicinity of 6 to 8 weeks closure for that one aspect of the project, yes.
Ooh, a lot of questions on this end. All right, Councilor Moreau.
I was just hoping we could get the city attorney to opine about, because we are sending the aspect of the parking spaces on High Street to Parking, Traffic, and Safety, that it's not in conflict with us voting on this agreement tonight.
Yeah, I understand that there's nothing in here that indicates timing, but the agreement is that we're going to have the developer change High Street consistent with the plans that are attached. That would mean taking out the parking spaces on the loading zone on High Street. This is going to take like a 1.5 year project down the road. In the meantime, it's an opportunity for Parking, Traffic, and Safety to study whether they want to eliminate those parking spaces permanently and recommend an ordinance change, or make other recommendations to the city council.
If I could just add to the parking space conversation, it is not, well, you could have a shared street and still have parking spaces. So the two are not mutually exclusive, and I just want to make sure people know that that's part of the conversation.
And just one, this is getting a lot of folks trying to answer on this, but our ordinance doesn't allow us to change. We can't obligate outside of what our ordinance allows us to do.
I understand that. I just want to make sure that the public fully understands that that portion of this won't move forward until Parking, Traffic, and Safety report back. That's what I was trying to make sure we fully understand.
And to underscore that, and it's important, both for the public to understand the process and for the public to understand their part in the process, this will go to PTS as a matter of the normal course of business that we would do in any change to parking. That's why we have a Parking and Traffic and Safety. They could make a recommendation, and that recommendation could be implemented overnight, basically, if it became an action item. If the recommendation, like, yeah, let's do this right away, it would come back as an action item, and then could be temporarily implemented for a year, and then taken up through an ordinance change through the omnibus. Now, I'm losing a couple of people probably at home, but it's the normal course of action is to get a recommendation back from PTS. This would flow no differently than that, because we have no other means through our ordinances to enact this change. So this is the first step for that, regardless of what we can agree to here. The second is if they make a recommendation that would, I don't know if there's been, chances in the past where PTS has made a different recommendation and the council would ignore it, but when that would come back to the council, there would also be a public hearing, because it would be an ordinance change, and then it would take 3 readings for that. So there's both a public hearing, or there's an opportunity to speak, public comment at PTS, as well as an opportunity to speak if this would ever to be a permanent change for the public to weigh in on. And those are just the rules that we have, and that we have to abide by.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear to everyone that this agreement doesn't change that. And I think we've made that clear.
Your Honor, can I just make a quick PTS comment?
Yep.
We're anticipating this will be on the September 7th agenda, which is at 8:30 in the morning in Conference Room A, and it'll also be available on Zoom for people if they wanted to Zoom in and talk about this topic or any of our other topics.
Thank you, Councilor Bagley, and for your service on the PTS at 8:30 in the morning. Councilor Tabor.
Mayor, thank you. I do think that we'll be, I know that I will be glad if this moves ahead. I think they're good improvements. They activate an area that needs an upgrade. My question, though, for the city attorney, the drawings have replacing a sewer line, putting in a communications conduit, and water connections. In other words, all of the subsurface work. And those are not in the developer obligations at all. Is that something we should address? We've got all of the above-the-ground improvements itemized, but none of the below-ground.
So
Typically, I know in our other projects, we've been very clear about where the responsibility for the sewer and water lies.
So I know that we've addressed it in the whereas clauses that the developer would be conducting those improvements to the infrastructure, but Attorney Woodland is here to address that specifically.
It is in the drawings.
It's in the drawings and in the initial portion of the memorandum.
Oh, sorry, I was looking at the drawings. Susie, please.
Sure.
Floor is yours.
As mentioned earlier, this project has all of its land use board approvals, and all of those utility connections are handled through that other part of the vehicle.
Okay.
So that's why you don't see, there's actually a lot of other requirements for the construction of that new project, but they're encompassed not in the MOA, but in the documents that will flow from those land use approvals, which include working with the Public Works Department to kind of do all the underground specifications, connections, and all of that sort of usual business, the bonding, and the CMMP, which will come again at a later date once we get a schedule. So those pieces will flow.
Okay, so it's part of the 2 Congress approval through the plan.
Correct.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Councilor Denton.
Just for clarification for anyone in the public who was watching this, when the city attorney spoke, so this is a question for the city attorney, you had mentioned that this agreement has 2 optional things regarding the parking garage that either the city or the developer could pursue, and they're both just studies. The second study you mentioned was regarding the flow of traffic, the Hanover garage. The first one, that one had to do specifically with the feasibility of a shared trash and recycling area within the Hanover garage?
Right, so on page 3 on part 2, number 2 and 3. Yep.
Thank you.
And to clarify, City Attorney, we do not have an obligation to create a solution for a shared trash.
No, we do not.
Okay. So if there's private incentive to create an answer for the trash to move dumpsters out, somebody might say, well, the building that currently has that can put it out on Market Street, I would say, or Congress Street. I would say that's not a solution, to that. So if there's going to be a moving of where the trash is now, that's going to require that's a private investment to. They are the ones with the incentive to change that, and the city is certainly amenable to any conversations, but the incentive lies with the private developer in this case.
Right, and I think the developer in this matter indicated that that is his goal, and he'll be working with the abutters, the other property owners, to effectuate that.
Thank you.
Assistant Mayor.
City Attorney, there was a comment made earlier about limited ADA access to the stairs that would be at the top, and there was a comment, I believe, that said that handicap accessibility would come at a cost. But to me, I understand that anyone at this point can access the elevator free of cost in the High Hanover Garage, which would then allow them to have ADA access to the landing at the top. Is that correct?
That's correct. And my understanding of the ADA requirements are not that every stairwell has to be accessible by a wheelchair or other handicap provisions, as long as there are reasonable accommodations provided. And I think that's one of the reasons for the suggestion of the new doorway at the top of the hill at Haven Court, to put in a pedestrian doorway there into the garage, which would have close access to the elevator.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that that was clear to the public, that there would be no cost associated for a ADA handicap person to be able to access the benefit of this potential improvement.
Right.
Councilor Good.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have a question on the developers' obligations, section number 5, I guess it's page 3, around the developer shall designate a project manager who shall serve as the point of contact for all public inquiries. And that's part of the CMMP process, so that's coming later. I just wanted to make a suggestion that the city consider that the developer appoint a project manager agreeable to both parties. And the reason I say this is that we want to reassure all the abutters that they are going to get information in a timely manner, and that they're not just talking to someone who only represents the developer, but somebody who also would represent their interests, I think, as far as getting timely information out and being aware of what's going on with the project. I just want to make sure that that we consider that and that we discuss that.
I'm making a note to talk to the developer's attorney about adding that.
Councilor Moreau.
It was brought up earlier, the question as to whether or not the city had these two roads and the improvements that are going to be happening, at least was in regards to the utilities and, fixing the roadway on our list. So I was wondering if our Director of Public Works could give us an idea about where it falls in the hierarchy of our long-term planning.
What was it called? The hit list?
The batting order.
Batting order.
Batting
order.
This looks like one of the slow walk-ups.
Thought you were getting away with just a trophy tonight, huh?
Good evening. Peter Rice, Director of Public Works. Mr. Mayor, City Council. There currently isn't anything scheduled to do work on that area. However, we're cognizant of the challenges the sidewalks and the roadway pose to pedestrians and vehicular traffic. We are anticipating the master plan for Market Square to include that area, so we were thinking that it was going to be, kind of part of that whole effort. Obviously, if a developer needs utilities to enable the development of his property, and that's in front of our schedule, it's incumbent upon them to take care of that, which is the case this evening that we're speaking to. So getting roadway and utilities addressed and not burdening the taxpayer is a significant benefit to the city. And I believe we still are retaining, I know we're retaining control of the property. It's city property. So I see this as a positive thing overall. We didn't have a scheduled plan at this point, but with all the things in flux, it was hard to, really put that on a schedule.
Thank you.
So just a follow-up to Mr. Rice. These are, when we say there's a requirement to the utility improvements, and Attorney Woodland also mentioned that they're not spelled out on a cost or on a line item to Councilor Tabers because they are part of the 1 Congress Street improvements. What we are talking about this evening is if we want, as a council, as a matter of policy, to accept the overland street improvements that would be a result of Mr. McNabb's investment in the streetscape. The utility work, that's subject to the One Congress. I just want to clarify that. Is that correct?
That my understanding is that as a developer comes forward and gets site approval, there's often enabling work that's required. That was part of the site approvals, and I don't have them fresh in my mind, but it's my understanding that that was required for him to be able to enable the work. Because the road was going to be completely destroyed anyway, Mr. McNabb suggested a paver alternative, which is a higher product than probably would have been installed had we done it ourselves. So, from our perspective, there's a benefit from an improved aesthetic. We may have done something more significant, but at this point, where it wasn't on our schedule, we hadn't had a public process. We didn't have the opportunity to come up with that. Something like the Chestnut Street is what's envisioned. The pavers there, it's a shared street, and it seems like a good opportunity for the city from our perspective.
Thank you, Peter.
Yep.
Mrs. Mayor.
Thank you. And Peter, thank you for mentioning Chestnut Street, because often when residents have talked to me about this project, I point them to Chestnut Street as a good understanding of what a shared space street is, that cars still go access that road, but it also is wide enough that it is pedestrian friendly. This may be a question for City Attorney or Attorney Woodland. There were questions, and we had discussed that fees would be waived for this part of the project, but I want to make a clarification that fees are still being for one Congress, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. Whatever license fees, encumbrance fees are required for that project of one Congress, those are still being charged. The only fees being waived are for the public realm improvements.
Thank you for that.
So I just want to, before I get to Councilor Cook, I want to make sure that for the folks following at home, where we are right now is that we are discussing not the fees that happen for one Congress, but the fees waived to improve what we're talking about, the public realm. The decision when it comes to parking, although conceptually it seems though there's approval of that, it still has to follow through a public process, and that process is PTS for the parking spots. Both these and any that would be lost in any future still have to go through that public process, and we're deciding whether or not we want to accept the monies to improve this street when it's reconstructed after the already approved plan for one Congress. Okay, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is just a clarification question on utilities under the road. Will we be requiring, or is it already there, the stormwater separation, sewer separation for this area?
Drainage is part of the exercise. That portion of the city is separated, though.
Okay.
So but there are drain, sewer, water, electricity, gas, telecommunications. I mean, it is a very tight space with a lot of stuff in it.
Thank you.
I guess I just have one question for, I guess we'll go with the city attorney. What is the obligation to stick to the plan? Like the plan that's outlined right here in terms of the designs. If there are modifications to the design through working with abutters from a approval process, what is the requirement to stick with the design, and if any changes were to be had to the design, how would they fall through the public purview?
So I think the answer is in part 1, number 7 there on page 2. that any changes to the improvements from what is in the exhibit, you know, the diagrams that you have to go through the city manager and the director of public works. And the city manager has discretion in determining whether that's a material change or a change that she would approve on her own.
Okay. So how, how much leeway would we have with material changes? Would that be governed by the same sort of conference with legal on material changes? Like if we were going to talk about putting trash somewhere?
Absolutely. Let me weigh in to say if it's remotely material, it's coming back to council.
Okay.
And it also, we have a provision that if it's, you know, really aesthetic changes that aren't depicted here, it would go through Public Art Review Committee.
Okay. And there was a lot of talk during the site walk about working with the abutters to make sure that, how are the abutters through this process protected and involved with the implementation of designs that are on paper that go into a three-dimensional kind of measuring the curb, you know, step up, step down, et cetera. How is that, how does that get addressed in the CMMP?
So that will be in the CMMP, but also there is a provision in here mandating that the developer provide written notice to the abutters and their tenants for the construction stages established by the CMMP. And those notices are going to go out in at least once a month, if not more often. And that will also be the role of the project manager to make sure that people are informed of what is happening and what to expect as time progresses with the project.
Okay. And to relay some of the concerns that we did hear in council chambers last meeting, it was predominantly around the use of what the street would turn into. Now, there was, I think, on the site walk, a general agreement that the water pooling, et cetera, state of disrepair in the street, and I think it would be a reasonable person would look at the street and realize that we have not done as much to these streets as we've done to other parts of the street, especially in opposition to you know, what is done at Commercial Alley and redone at Commercial Alley. We did a lot of work to make it look exactly the same, you know, minus the telephone pole and a tree, unfortunately. But there's a lot of I think there's a lot of work that's needed to be done, and so to take $3 million from a private interest that is going to benefit, obviously, from this being a better street, but it takes it off the tax burden, I think is a positive thing. I think there's many opportunities from PTS back to council for any abutter to discuss the impact, as well as other residents from the parking and the traffic flow over this next 18 months, that we will have a good idea and will kind of dovetail nicely into the Market Square study that we are currently doing, or currently plan to do.
So I think just one other point to clarify for everyone is that at the conclusion of the improvements, the construction of the improvements, there is noted in this agreement that the city will accept ownership in writing of all of those improvements, meaning we take back all of our rights. We haven't relinquished any of our rights to the public right of way. We haven't given the public right of way to the developer. This is still the city's right of way, and we can do whatever we want with that right of way after the construction has been completed.
Any other questions? And it's impossible for us to give up those rights, you know, in a public way. We just can't do that. And it's just, I think that was clear and understood by the developer in the latest draft, that they understand that, you know, this is a point in time, and a point in time in the future has a process. That process is PTS, and then back to the council with a recommendation. If that recommendation is anything other than to move forward, it would require an ordinance change even before anything could happen. That would be 3 readings. So,
Right.
all right. Any other questions? Do we have a motion?
2 motions,
Oh, that's right, yeah. I knew it. I felt it, Kelly, that we didn't have a motion. At first, await a motion to authorize the city manager to execute and deliver a memorandum of agreement in substantial similar form to the document contained in the agenda packet.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Next up, I'd wait a motion to request a report back from the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee with a recommendation regarding the elimination of parking in the loading zone from High Street.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just a quick clarification, Your Honor. I believe we made this motion at the last council meeting. There's no issue if we make it twice.
I don't think so, but I would like to just say, a member of the public mentioned while the parking, the trash and the whole garage and the entrance that's separate from this and might not ever happen. But with the addition of the passage through, there is another aspect of parking, and I'm wondering if it could just, if we could amend the motion or just restate the motion to say, move to request a report back from the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee with a recommendation regarding the elimination and parking and loading zone, parking spots and loading zone.
Not specific to
And
the
not
street.
specific to one street.
High Street?
Yes. Yeah, including the ones in the garage. I
So
understand.
include the ones in the garage and all the other aspects of this, so it's more holistic. Since I asked for the motion, somebody who
I
else?
accept the friendly.
Okay. All right. We're just going to elimination of parking spaces and the loading zone. Okay. Any discussion? Kelly, is that clear?
Yes, it
All right.
is.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. At our last meeting, we discussed this, and I voted against referring it to parking, traffic, and safety, mostly because I didn't want to add a layer of further a request to parking, traffic, and safety where they felt like they were dealing with a matter that was likely political and a council matter. But now that it is part of a review process, I could support it.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. And if I had realized that this is the natural course of action for any elimination of parking spaces at the time and not, after, probably would have mentioned that at the time. But knowing that and knowing that if this were to happen more quickly, it would be through a recommendation of PTS, and they're in the best positions to look at this holistically and also provide alternatives with the public in mind. So I'm glad we were able to get to that point. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is it.
We have one more item, a quick one, Your Honor. It relates to the Public Art Trust Fund and a request for a referral. We have deposited $150,000 in the Public Art Trust Fund to fulfill the city's % for art obligation related to the Pierce Island Wastewater Treatment Plant of the Year facility upgrade. And as such, we would recommend that the City Council make a formal referral to the Public Art Review Committee for next steps regarding the disposition of that money.
So I guess I just have a quick question on that. $150,000. How much did the plant cost? More than that, right?
92 million, 91 million?
What are the stipulations, just for myself and maybe some folks at home, in terms of the %? Is there a limit on that?
There's a
We have a
cap.
limit, and
Yeah,
the
it's
cap
capped.
caps at, okay. It caps out at 150,000, is that it?
Yes.
Oh, it caps out at 15 million. Okay. Okay. Got it. Councilor Cook?
I guess I would make a motion to request the public art review, or
I'd wait a motion to move that the City Council refer this to the Public Art Review Committee for consideration of the development of art for Pierce Island.
so moved.
Second.
Any further discussion?
For the city manager, I believe this does not have to all be at one location, correct?
You are correct. You are correct, and that's something the Public Art Review Committee can take up.
Right, because we modified that
Correct.
ordinance, so there's flexibility.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
I just wanted to say thank you to the city manager for putting this money in the trust and letting us know that it's time for the Public Art Review Committee to step up with the first major project. I'm sure they're excited to get started, especially when they hear about this tomorrow. They'll be very excited.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Can we take a short break?
Yeah, we can take a 7-minute recess, getting back at 9:40.
It's just enough.
All right, we'll be back. Welcome back, everyone. No consent agenda tonight. That's actually a first for me over 4 years. I don't remember not having a consent agenda. All right. Well, on to presentations and written communications. First up, presentation regarding capital improvement plan kickoff for fiscal year 25. We have with us Peter Britz, Director of Planning and Sustainability. Peter, take it away.
Hello, Mayor. Thank you. Members of City Council, Peter Britz, Director of Planning and Sustainability. This is the kickoff for the CIP 2025 to 2030. I'm going to go over what the CIP is, the CIP timeline, and then public input opportunities. Glasses. So the CIP is a 6-year plan for establishing upcoming capital projects such as roadways, pavings, or building improvements. CIP is a budgeting tool that does not spend or commit any money, but instead identifies projects for various upcoming years and its planned budget sources. Some projects move forward and become part of the later budget process. And the CIP can utilize, the public can utilize the CIP to learn more about upcoming capital projects, the timeline in which they are planned, project details, evaluation criteria, costs, linked to relevant documents, and identification of project funding. Citizens have numerous public input avenues throughout the process, from the ability to request a project to public hearings throughout the document cycle. What qualifies as a capital improvement project? Land acquisition, construction or expansion of a public facility, street, utility, or public infrastructure, rehabilitation of a public facility or public infrastructure provided the cost is $50,000 or more, design work or planning studies related to a capital project or implementation of the master plan, any item or piece of equipment, non-vehicular in nature, that costs more than $50,000 and has a life expectancy of 5 or more years, and any replacement vehicle which has a life expectancy of 5 or more years costing more than $50,000. How are projects evaluated and prioritized? Projects are evaluated both financially and based on the 10 evaluation criteria shown above. Items that respond to federal or state requirements or address public health or safety needs take priority. Other criteria utilized by the Planning Board and City Council to best prioritize projects. And then I'll just take you a little bit through the process here. The project submission process starts when projects are submitted by city departments based on infrastructure needs and or master plan department study goals, or through the citizen requested project submissions. Financials are established by the city's finance department, where documents illustrate the city's legal debt margin, current debt obligations, and financial needs of the CIP based on the current project requests. Projects are prioritized. Projects are reviewed by city staff and prioritized to ensure compliance with financial debt margins, life safety, legal requirements, and public health need. Projects will take priority. The Planning Board reviews all projects with city staff in conjunction with the master plan. The City Council reviews projects with city staff and discusses financial implications and project priorities. The City Council can change project priorities during the CIP or the budget process. Citizen input is received. Citizens weigh in on their opinions of the projects, the project costs, priorities, and details. And then city budget. The City Council adopts the CIP in March after adoption of all general fund projects slated for the upcoming fiscal year are placed into the city's budget. Project fundings and priorities can be altered at any time until the budget is passed. And then just a little bit about public input opportunities. There's an opportunity for public project submissions. Have a project that meets the CIP criteria, submit it to the city online or in the planning department at City Hall. The deadline this year for public submissions is September 15th. There's a Planning Board public hearing. They hold a public hearing following the CIP presentation in December, so the public can give input there. There's a City Council public hearing. The City Council holds a public hearing on the Capital Improvement Plan in February of 24. The City Council budget public hearing. The City Council holds at least one public hearing on the city's budget, which will include relevant projects from the CIP. So that's the final opportunity for comment on the CIP. And then how to submit a project from the public. So if you have a project that meets the criteria listed in this handout or on our web page on the CIP, you can submit it through the Viewpoint portal or OpenGov. You can do that on your phone or your computer at home. Pretty easy interface. Projects are reviewed by the appropriate department. Projects are either moved forward to the main document as its own unique project, could be combined with an existing project, or placed in a year outside of the CIP, or deemed unqualified as a CIP project. All citizens' requests are listed, including department comments, in the CIP in Appendix 1. And then the CIP process timeline. So the kickoff, here we are, August-September timeframe. Citizen request forms are accepted, again, due September 15th. October, citizen requests are reviewed by appropriate departments. City departments submit project requests, and the CIP financials are prepared, and the document is assembled. November-December timeframe, the City Council reviews citizen requests. The subcommittee meets to review these citizen projects. The Planning Board CIP subcommittee reviews projects. The Planning Board reviews and holds a public hearing and votes to recommend the adoption of the CIP by the City Council. And then in January to February timeframe, the City Council reviews, holds a public hearing, and adopts the CIP. And then April, May, June, capital projects for the upcoming fiscal year are utilized as part of the non-operating budget. City Council considers funding projects as part of the passage of the annual budget. That's it. Any questions, comments? All right.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
Appreciate it. Next up, a letter from Valerie Rochon, Portsmouth 400th, Portsmouth, New Hampshire 400th Incorporated, requesting permission to hold a community picnic on Sunday, October 1st, 2023, from 12 to 3 at Leary and Central Fields. I'd wait a motion to refer to the city manager with authority to act.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments? Councilor Cook.
If the council approves this, I have volunteered to help coordinate the council volunteers to cook at the cookout. So please, I will make sure the city sends out an appropriate email address for where you can respond and express your interest in cooking if this is approved.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. I'll sign up. Councilor Moreau. I don't know. I want my cooking, but we're talking like
I will
burgers, right?
absolutely
Yeah.
volunteer myself to cook, since I'm pretty much the cook at home as well. But I just wanted to add in that, there was, that the whole entire intention of where we're holding this is to make it extremely family-friendly and to make it as free as possible. So we certainly hope that everyone will come and spend a few hours with the council as we sling burgers or whatever else we're asked to cook, and hand out some food, and hopefully have a fun, and let's just all pray for really good weather.
Yeah, that's the thing, the weather. So I guess, I, as a father to two young girls, one of them who learned how to surf this weekend, thank you, Surf Sessions birthday party for Brooke that we got invited to. I think somebody had mentioned that there wasn't a lot of family activities, and it couldn't be further from the truth from our experience. Now, I get that, I go to a lot of these events, and I take my daughters to those, but the parade, a fantastic example, the Little Italy Carnival, that was, it's been a long time since I've done some free sand art. I don't even think it was at Market Square Day, when I was a kid. I think I was bumming, $5 after my mom and dad to do the sand art in the little bottles there. But that was a great throwback. A lot of, I think the stages is out there. There's a lot of opportunities. Obviously, community dinner was not one where, the kids were going to come out at 7 to 9. But the picnic is an opportunity for something really magical to happen. So I've been impressed at all these events that there's just been so many Portsmouth people that grew up with, knew, that have been really engaged, volunteering. And so I'm really excited for this one. But I won't, just because it's not a signature event doesn't mean it's not an event.
It is.
I know, no, I'm saying I meant this is a signature event that we're voting, hopefully having. But there's a lot of events just because they're not listed as a signature event. This is the Mayor's BIPOC Fest. There's a lot of events that are taking on a special significance in the 400th and trying to take on a lot of opportunity. One of those, Round Island Regatta, drag the kids out to that, they had, boats that you could build and, float right in front of, Round Island. There's a lot of opportunities.
There's
saying.
actually a lantern festival on South Milk Pond the
That's
night
right,
before the
lantern.
picnic, so
Yeah.
hopefully people can go out and enjoy the entire weekend in the area.
So I will say that there's there's a lot that's going on. Thank you to the Portsmouth, New Hampshire 400. Thank you to all the nonprofits and other community events. I'm saying BIPOC Fest because it comes to mind. There's a lot that's going on that people are putting a lot of effort and time to, and I just want to take this letter of Valerie to, obviously there's a motion that's attached to it, but thank you, Valerie, for all the work that you're doing. Thank you to the PNH or Portsmouth, New Hampshire 400 and all the volunteers that make all the events go. It's been appreciated, and if you're looking for more events to take the kids to, they're
Air
all
show.
online. Yeah, there's an air show too. There's a freaking air show. There's a lot that's going on, and really excited for all the work that's going into it. But with that, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Email correspondence sneaking in at the top of this page. Almost missed it, but I'd wait a motion to accept and place on file.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Now we have on to the council appointments to be voted. I will call out first Paul Messier to the Building Code Board of Appeals, Megan Fabrasia to the Library Board of Trustees, Jennifer Madelbaum to the Library Board of Trustees, William Bowen to the Planning Board as an alternate. Bill is here this evening.
Jennifer's on Zoom.
And Jennifer's on Zoom. Oh, excellent. And Ivy Robichar to the Sustainable Practices Blue Ribbon Committee. I would wait a motion to make those appointments.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for your willingness to serve Portsmouth. We are indebted to your generosity of spirit and time.
There's also a letter from Joanna Landis.
He's getting there.
Yep. So we have the acceptance of resignations up next. And so we have two. One is Joanna Landis from the Historic District Commission. I would wait a motion to accept her resignation with regret and send her a letter thanking her for her service.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And next, as a slightly later edition than the Wednesday at 12, we also have a resignation from Harold Whitehouse from the Parking and Traffic Safety Committee. I'd wait a motion to accept Harold's resignation with regret and to send him a letter thanking him for his service. And if I get that motion, I would.
So moved.
Second.
I just state a couple of things. Harold served Portsmouth first as country in the Navy, then as the I believe it was the Navy Yard. Went back to the Herald, came back to the Navy Yard. Always liked working with wood. If I recall a story, always talked about being the oldest of six, and surviving a hurricane before my dad was even born. So he served Portsmouth for 30 years, 12 years as a city councilor, 18 years as a school board, 16 years as a school board member, and then 2 years as a police commissioner. 30 years of service in the city that you grew up with, certainly more than enough time, and a great example of what he has done as an elected official. He is resigning from Parking and Traffic Safety Committee, where he has served for how many years now?
Probably all 30, just about.
Yeah, so
12 since 2010.
Since 2010, continued to serve. And I think when I spoke to Harold this morning, he said that he'd like to run again, and we could certainly use him, but he deserves and has earned some time away from the work of the city. But when he's ready to come back at maybe 97, we'll certainly open him, those arms back. And thank you, Harold, for all you've done for Portsmouth. There are many, including myself, that are indebted to you. So thank you so much. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to personally thank Harold. My grandfather had the pleasure of working with him at the Portsmouth Herald many moons ago. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Harold my whole life. And I know my father and myself has always looked up to Harold as a role model and an example. And I just can't thank him enough for all his service to the city of Portsmouth. So thank you, Harold.
Councilor Bagley.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I was lucky enough to serve with Harold on the PTS, and when the mayor and I found out that he was going to be stepping down, we both called him today, and he said something to me on the phone. He said, you know, when people come to this great city and they see our tugboats and they see the beautiful river, and they decide they want to go out on a night for town for dinner, and then they move here, he said the most important thing they can do, the thing that makes this city great, is they can volunteer. We have so many boards, so many committees. There's so many ways to get involved and give back to the city. And he said, I just hope everybody that comes here and loves Portsmouth finds a way to give back to the community. And that's really who Harold Whitehouse is. So I just wanted to mention that and thank him for his service.
Well said. Councilor Tabor.
He's had a wonderful career of service to the city, and I had the pleasure of taking him down to a reunion of old Herald employees way back to the building on Congress Street that your father worked in. And he had a great time just telling stories. His love for the city is bottomless, and he leaves a real career of service. So, and he's still around to go have a cup of coffee with.
Yeah, Harold, in that same conversation, gave me all of his opinions on any traffic-related things that were coming up on this meeting or next meeting. And I don't expect that to stop anytime soon. And so, Harold, you know where we all live and how to get a hold of us, and wish you our best love and respect for all you've done so far. With that, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, Harold. Councilor Bagley.
Thank you, Your Honor. Parking Traffic Safety Committee action sheet and minutes of August 3rd, 2023 meeting. I don't know if we have an action sheet, but move to accept and...
We do have an action sheet.
Move to accept and approve the action sheet and minutes of August 3rd, 2023 Parking Traffic and Safety Committee. If I get a second, I'll speak to it.
Second.
This was actually a rather light meeting where we got a lot of report backs, how some of the traffic calming that we've implemented across the city is working and what adjustments need to be made. We also looked at some requests for Mercy Street and Lafayette, but we're going to look at those again next month. So we're not, as far as I know, we're not making any changes to anything that's out there currently. It was a lot of reports back and ongoing studies of traffic issues we have around the city at this meeting.
Any discussion? Again, remember these meetings are at 8:30, and usually what comes on the agenda is a response to citizen feedback and a process. I know there's a lot of folks that reach out to me on why we do things in the city one way or the other, specifically around parking related or traffic related activities. And one way to better understand that is to be involved in PTS. And that's really where we try to, as a city, direct the efforts. Councilor Bagley. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, approval of grants to donations. First, an acceptance of donation to the fire department from Lloyd Woodruff for the department's discretion in the amount of $200. I'd wait a motion to approve and accept the donation for the fire department as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, acceptance of donation to the rec department from Burger Bar for skate park fundraising in the amount of $1,049. I'd wait a motion to approve and accept the donation for the rec department as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Councilor Blaylock.
I'd just like to thank Burger Bar for their help in hosting these events. It's been very successful, and any contributions to this helps.
Excellent. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next up, city manager's informational items.
Your Honor, I have 4 quick bullet updates from last week's Pease Development Authority meeting. First up, Captain Gino Marconi was awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award by the International Association of Maritime and Port Executives. He is only one of 5 people internationally to receive this award. It's a big deal.
Good job, Gina.
Congratulations to Gina. We voted to create an overlay district at the parking lot in the front of the trade port, half owned by PDA, half owned by DOT, currently operated by CNJ bus lines. It's currently in the runway protection zone, which essentially recognizes under PDA zoning a use that has existed for more than 20 years, and now it exists formally. The unaudited FY23 financials were discussed, and Pease took in $19.5 million in revenue, which was up over $1 million over projected, which was great. And of note, fuel flowage fees were up significantly. 2.5 million more gallons were dispensed than budgeted. And lastly, the PDA agreed to commit to energy consulting services contract with Enel X North America, same firm that the state of New Hampshire is using. They're shopping for a fixed price energy contract. They've been sort of surfing the utilities, if you will, and that's not a great place to be. And their previous contract expired in October of 22. So that is it for updates on Pease. And item number 2 in your packet is an update on the Coakley Executive Committee. We had a resignation of Chairman Eric Spear, and in his place I've appointed Glenn Normando to serve as chairman. So they had one meeting where they served together, so to speak, and it's my understanding Glenn will chair the next meeting next week. So we would like to thank former Mayor Spear for his service to that committee.
Former Mayor Spear. Under miscellaneous?
It was really a follow-up.
Question, okay.
A follow-up regarding the Pease Development Authority. It was brought up earlier as to whether or not the Pease Development Authority had ever considered housing, and I just thought maybe you could bring that question back to them, and we could get an update on that for the public.
It was studied at great length by former councilor, now current state senator Rebecca Perkins-Coca. It's my understanding that the management is looking to re-engage the FAA in conversations that would allow for some housing at some places within the trade port, and those conversations will start up.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Assistant Mayor.
Thank you, Ernest. Just because you mentioned it, I do also want to extend an invitation to the council and to the public for the 3rd annual New England BIPOC Festival, which is the Black Indigenous People of Color multicultural festival that will be held on September 24th from noon to 5 p.m. at Vida Cantina. It is a free event. There is free food. There is lots of amazing acts coming from all throughout New England, including Hawaiian hula dancers. We have a mariachi band. We have hip hop. We have reggae. We have the Korean American Center. We have the Indigenous Peoples of New Hampshire. We have the Indonesian Cultural Center. So it's a whole plethora of vendors and businesses, roughly about 45 right now. Again, it's a completely free event based solely on donations from our businesses throughout New England. But again, completely free event, and I hope everyone can attend.
Thank you. I will. Councilor Cook.
And I will add to that one other event coming up this weekend, another Portsmouth 400th event, the Seacoast Jazz Society's 40th annual Seacoast Jazz Festival is scheduled for Saturday. That's in Prescott Park, and again, that is by donation only. It's looking like it might be on the rain date. We're watching the weather carefully. The rain date is Sunday. So come out and hear some great jazz. We have some internationally recognized artists coming in.
This is the Tommy Gallant? Is this the?
Yes, it's the Seacoast Jazz Society, Seacoast Jazz Festival. And it's always been in honor of Tommy Gallant.
And yeah.
Here, and I have one more item if I could. It's timely, it's free. It's the library, and I told the library folks I'd push their strategic plan survey. It runs through August 31st. They already have over 1,500 respondents, which is a crazy good number, but we need as many as we can get. You can find the survey online on the library's website or in person at the library and all of our city facilities. End of the month. Thank you for participating.
Any other miscellaneous? We can go to 10:30 before we got to get a motion to keep going. All right.
Or we could finish
All right.
early.
Could await a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.